My sister made me play the role of hired help at her wedding. This was done so I could serve drinks and keep her family from finding out about our less-than-ideal relationship. Then, after her divorce, when she was struggling financially, I gave her a job as a server at my wedding venue. Now, she's serving drinks at her ex-husband's new wedding while wearing the staff uniform. I never figured I'd be recounting this, but I need some advice on something my sister, Autumn, asked me to do for her forthcoming wedding. I'm still trying to figure out whether I'm making a big deal out of this, or if it really is as bizarre as I think. For a little background, I'm a 35-year-old male, and I run a thriving business that I created from the ground up. While I don't want to sound like I'm boasting, it's crucial for you to understand that I've done quite well for myself. My sister Autumn, who is 32, is marrying into a very rich family, and I think that's where the issues begin. When we were kids, Autumn and I were inseparable. We came from pretty humble beginnings. Our parents were hard workers, but we certainly weren't rich. We shared everything, from the clothes we got from others to the one tiny bathroom we had in our small house. We always had each other's support, though. I can recall countless nights where we'd sit on our little back porch, talking about what we hoped our lives would be like while sharing a bag of Austin brand chips. Things shifted after Autumn met Hunter, who is 34, at a charity event about 3 years ago. She was there because her friend got her a ticket through her job. Hunter is from an old money family, like really old. The kind of family that has family. When I asked her why, she just shrugged and said they wouldn't understand. Artwork adorned multiple homes, giving off an impression of affluence. Initially, everything appeared perfectly ordinary. I found Hunter to be pleasant enough when we first encountered each other, even though he did make some peculiar remarks, expressing his surprise regarding specific aspects of Autumn's history. I didn't dwell on it at the moment. However, yesterday, Autumn requested we meet for coffee. She was nervously toying with her coffee cup the whole time, avoiding my gaze. I sensed something was amiss, but I couldn't have anticipated the request she was about to make. "I need you to work at my wedding," she said, as her gaze remained fixed on her untouched latte. I assumed she was requesting my venue services, which would have been absolutely acceptable. But no, she wanted me to pretend to be a member of the service crew, not attend as her brother. Instead, I was to become one of the real staff, circulating with beverages and staying unnoticed. At first, I was certain she was joking. She wasn't. Hunter's family, they're not like us, she explained, her voice barely audible. They have certain expectations. I found out she'd shared inaccurate details about our family with them. It turned out she'd been creating an elaborate, false narrative about our family for the past 3 years. According to her story, our parents were retired art dealers who now traveled extensively. In truth, Dad worked at a hardware store while Mom cleaned houses. She also informed them that we grew up in a different place, attended private schools that we never went to, and had family vacations we could never have afforded. When I pressed her about why she was doing this, she just gave a shrug and said, "They just wouldn't understand." I know they wouldn't understand. Well, she kind of motioned in my general direction. What I do isn't really what they'd anticipate. The feeling in that moment was like a swift kick to the stomach. This was my sister, the same girl who, at one point, decked a kid for teasing me about my hand-me-down footwear. Now she was suggesting I conceal who I truly am. Because it clashed with her carefully constructed story. "What about Mom and Dad?" I finally inquired. She recoiled slightly, that they won't attend. I informed Hunter's relatives, who are residing in Europe. They are supposedly putting on an art display in Paris. My parents, who have literally never traveled outside the United States, are suddenly orchestrating an art show in Paris. The whole thing was so ridiculous it would be comical. If the situation weren't so incredibly painful, I didn't immediately reply. Autumn kept on going, detailing how it was just for one single day, how she'd make amends, how crucial this was for her aspirations. All I could concentrate on was how she used to enthusiastically announce to everyone that I was her brother, even during my awkward teenage years, when I had horrible acne and braces. "Please," she said eventually. "I realize. It's a significant request, but I can't take the chance of wrecking this. His family, they just wouldn't get it. There. Not like us." I stood up to depart, but she quickly grabbed my arm. "Roman, I beg of you, I need you to do this for me only this time. Here's the deal. I'm able to decline. I could just flat out refuse to play a role in this deception. I could reveal all of her falsehoods right this second. However, just looking at my sister, the person I shared the experience of growing up with, this whole situation is really hitting me hard, and it's so difficult to describe how awful it feels when I'm being asked to conceal my true self. I told her I needed some time to figure things out. Ever since I said that, my phone has been blowing up with calls and texts. Our cousin Alia, who knows the complete picture, believes I should just say no. My wife Angel says the decision is mine, but it's really obvious she's totally repulsed by the whole thing. The wedding is fast approaching in just 3 weeks. I have to make up my mind quickly. Some part of me wants to see just how far she'll take this. Another part of me wants to appear in a tuxedo and raise a glass to my beloved sister right in front of everyone. However, more than anything, this makes me sad. Am I losing it for even entertaining this idea? How did we go from sharing a bag of cheap chips together on the porch to her wanting me to be a server at her wedding? It has been half a year since my last update, and so much has changed. Firstly, I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post. In the end, I did exactly what my sister requested of me. I worked as a server at her wedding. I realize lots of you thought I shouldn't have, but sometimes you just have to let people figure things out for themselves. The wedding itself was exactly what you would imagine it to be. I wore the server's uniform, poured champagne, and watched my sister Mary integrate into the family she so desperately wanted to impress. My parents weren't there, still supposedly traveling in Paris. Autumn barely even glanced at me the entire evening, with one exception, when I nearly collided with Hunter's mother while carrying a tray. My sister's look of absolute terror. Her eyes revealed everything about what was important to her in that instant. Now, let's go to last week. I was busy with some paperwork at the place I work, and my assistant informed me my sister had arrived. I hadn't spoken to her since the wedding, besides a quick text message expressing thanks, which felt more like an obligation than true appreciation. When Autumn entered my office, I could barely believe it was her. The designer clothes and her perfectly done hair were absent. She actually looked like the sister I knew when we were kids, before all the phoniness. She sat down without any prompting, nervously wringing her hands, and began to weep. As it turned out, Hunter had discovered all of her fabrications. It wasn't about me, though. Seemingly, one of his relatives bumped into our mom at the supermarket. My mom, being her typically friendly self, started talking about how proud she was of her daughter's marriage to such a nice young man. She expressed how she wished she could have attended the ceremony, but Autumn had stated it would be better if we didn't come. I'm sure you can imagine how that conversation ended up with Hunter's people. He is divorcing me, Autumn said, as she dabbed her eyes with the sleeve of a sweater that wasn't from any designer label. His family. They're not just distancing themselves from me. They're making sure none of their friends will associate with me either. I gave her a tissue box and just waited. There's always more details to these kinds of situations. I can't get a job anywhere, she added. Everywhere I try, someone knows someone who. I'm acquainted with Hunter's relatives. I've been getting by on my savings, and then she pointed to her somewhat tattered clothing. I'm in need of assistance, Roman. The situation struck me as rather ironic. It was my sibling who, just half a year ago, couldn't bring herself to acknowledge me as family at her wedding. Now, she's sitting in my office, requesting my help. A part of me wanted to bring up that wedding day and how her actions made me feel like I didn't belong as her brother. However, as I looked at her, I noticed something I hadn't witnessed in ages. Sincerity. I made a mistake, she admitted in a quiet tone of voice. I truly messed up, Roman. I got so wrapped up in trying to become what they expected that I lost sight of my true self and who my family really is. She looked around my office, taking in the plaques and trophies on the wall, as well as the pictures of successful events. You've built all this by just being yourself. I tried to build something by pretending to be someone else and see where that landed me. I allowed the quiet to linger for a short time, reminiscing about all those nights on our old front porch, sharing dreams and inexpensive treats. At last I spoke. We're actually short-handed over at the venue. Her head shot up in surprise. What a starting-level position. It'll involve the same uniform you're familiar with from your wedding. The same hourly wage as everyone else, no preferential treatment. You want me to actually be staff? Really? The irony of that hit me. I couldn't resist a small grin, but yes, a real job with real work. You'll start from the very bottom like everyone else does. Do you think you can manage that? She gazed at me for what seemed like a long time, then let out a laugh that was partly a cry. I've earned that. This isn't really about what you've earned, Autumn. It's about what you require. And at this moment, you need employment. I'm giving you a job. Are you in or are you out? Angel, my better half, believes I'm being far too kind. Aaliyah, whose family, believes it's just perfect payback. I'm of the opinion it's somewhere in the middle ground. Autumn's first day was just yesterday. She's not exactly a tray-carrying expert quite yet. It turns out that doing it for a whole work day is much tougher than it seems. However, she's giving it her all. She's really making an effort. The curious thing is, Hunter reserved our space last week for his wedding to his new fiancée. He has no clue Autumn is employed here now. The wedding is in 8 weeks. I'm still undecided if I'll put her on the schedule for that day or not. A portion of me feels it would be a fitting punishment. A part of me thinks it would be harsh. But then I recall how she didn't even think twice about getting her own sibling to pretend to be an employee. And I'm left pondering if maybe some instruction is best learned through experience. What's your take, people of Reddit? Should I just let fate take its course? Final note. Okay, Reddit, well, it happened. Yesterday was Hunter's wedding to Claire, and yes, I did have Autumn scheduled to work. Before you label me as heartless, allow me to explain how everything unfolded. The last couple of months have been quite something. Autumn's actually become one of our best team members. She's dependable, works diligently, and surprisingly, she's modest. Her fancy apparel is gone, exchanged for practical footwear and a functional watch. She even moved in with my parents. I decided to cut back on expenses, something the old version of me would have considered unthinkable. I decided to keep Hunter's wedding a secret from her initially. I waited until just 14 days beforehand when they needed to lock in everyone's work shifts. I asked her to come into my office after her shift ended. "You're scheduled for something on the 15th, I stated as I pushed the work schedule toward her. She picked it up, glanced over it, and then became completely motionless. I saw her expression change through at least 5 different emotions before settling into an acceptance of the situation. "Is this some sort of payback?" she asked in a soft voice. "No," I answered her. "This is just part of your job unless you're saying you can't handle acting professional." She looked at the schedule for what seemed like a long time. "I can definitely be professional." Then she looked up at me. "I'm getting what I deserve, aren't I?" I told her that this wasn't about what she deserved. It was about the decisions she had made. She had made hers 6 months ago. I was making mine now. Hunter is a client who is paying us a lot of money to use our best space. This is about your team members, that's all there is to it. The wedding day finally arrived. I made sure everything was flawless, not because it was Hunter's wedding, but because that's how we do things for every single event. Autumn arrived earlier than needed, with her work clothes on and her name tagged neatly in place. If she was feeling anxious, she was hiding it very well. The outdoor ceremony was beautiful, and I realized Claire, Hunter's new wife, was the complete opposite of what I had expected. She wore a simple dress, laughed easily, and kept ensuring all of the workers had drinks and rests. While we were setting things up, I heard her telling Hunter that they should have planned a more modest, private event. He just gazed at her adoringly like she was the most wonderful thing. At last, Hunter saw Autumn arrive. She was bringing a tray of champagne as people entered the reception. He looked twice, then quickly said something to Claire under his breath. I felt a wave of tension, and I was prepared to step in if I had to. But Claire just glanced over, gave a little nod, and held Hunter's hand. They both acted like nothing was wrong. In the middle of the event, Claire went right up to Autumn. I was close by, acting like I was checking the table arrangements. "The service has been exceptional," Claire said with genuine warmth. "Everyone is doing such great work." Autumn, to her credit, remained completely composed. "Thank you, ma'am. Can I get you anything?" "No, thank you." Claire hesitated, then added in a quiet tone, "It takes a lot of strength to be here today. I admire that." After Claire left, I noticed Autumn slip into the storage room. I went after her and found her sitting on a box of napkins. She wasn't crying, just sitting. "Are you all right?" I inquired. She looked up at me and chuckled, actually laughed. "You know what? It's kind of amusing," she said. "She's exactly the type of person I pretended to be." She was graceful, kind, and sincere. But she actually possessed those qualities The evening wrapped up without any issues. Even when Hunter's mother realized who Autumn was and nearly choked on her drink, Autumn stayed completely composed. The old version of Autumn would have fallen apart or caused a disturbance. This time, she just continued doing her job with her chin up. When the final guest was gone, I found Autumn gathering up the glasses. She seemed exhausted, but also unusually tranquil. "Still upset with me for setting this up?" I questioned. She gave her head a little shake. "No, I actually needed this," she admitted. "I needed to observe." She sort of waved her hand around at the surroundings. "All of it, the thing I desperately tried to be a part of. It's not even that fantastic, you know," she continued. "All of the deception, all the falsehoods, for what purpose? They're just regular people, wealthy people, but still human. Some of them are genuinely okay," I commented, picturing Claire. "Yes," Autumn gave a little smile. "Some of them are." It makes me feel even more guilty about the lying. We finished cleaning up together in a comfortable quiet. As we were heading out, Autumn stopped me. Hey, Roman, remember back when we'd eat those cheap potato chips on the porch and chat about our goals? I nodded in agreement. Your ambitions were always better than mine. You always wanted to construct something substantial. I just wanted to be something I wasn't. She fiddled with her name tag. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to create something worthwhile as well. She began to leave, then hesitated. Oh, and Roman, the next time anyone asks me who I am, I'm telling them I'm your sister, regardless of the uniform I'm wearing. I watched as she walked toward her car, not the fancy one she used to have. Half a year had passed, but she got a smart, pre-owned one using her own cash. The payback I thought I craved felt insignificant when I saw my sister rediscovering herself. My mom phoned this morning. It seems like my sister made breakfast for everyone and they all ate together before she went to her work shift. It was the same thing we always did as kids. It's weird how fate can work sometimes. Sometimes it's not all about revenge, you know. Sometimes it's about finding your way back to what matters. But I still did make her work her ex-husband's wedding, so I suppose it's a tiny bit about revenge. The second tale involves my brother forcing me to eat his scraps, calling me the family waste bin. But after he lost everything in his divorce, I let him move in. Now he eats food that's a week old while he watches me prepare fresh meals for his former wife and kids. I never believed I would be writing this down, but after what happened at dinner last night, I really needed to unload this. My brother Henry always had this thing about food waste. When we were growing up, he'd always shove his leftovers onto my plate, telling me, "Lucas will eat it. He's our family garbage disposal." What started as a childhood nickname followed me somehow into adulthood, and it all blew up in a surprising way last night. To give you some background, I am the younger brother by 4 years. We were raised in a middle-class home where food wasn't exactly scarce, but Henry always acted like every little bit was a treasure unless it was on his plate. Then it was for me. The whole situation began when we were kids. Whenever he couldn't eat everything on his plate, he'd push it over to me, sporting a self-satisfied grin and declaring, "Can't let good food go to waste, right?" Our folks chalked it up to typical sibling antics, but it was more complicated than that. Henry would intentionally order an excessive amount of food or load his plate to the brim at family meals, fully aware he could manipulate me into eating it. "You're helping us out," he'd say, or "This is why you're the helpful one." I honestly believed that this was typical, that my job was to be the family's human waste bin. Last evening, we were all together for our usual monthly dinner. Henry's wife, Chloe, was unusually silent, and their daughters, Willow and Mila, kept giving each other these anxious glances. Henry was acting up, purchasing enough food for a small battalion. Just like always, when he was finished eating, he started inching his plates in my direction. "Go on, Lucas, you know the routine," he chuckled, but there was a subtle shift in his tone. I'd never heard that tone of voice from him before. It's important to avoid throwing away food, especially with the way things are financially nowadays, isn't it? I saw that Chloe's grip on her drink had gotten stronger. Willow, their daughter, who was a teenager, seemed incredibly engrossed in her napkin all of a sudden. That was when I made up my mind to stop pretending. "Actually, Henry, I'm fine," I said, moving my plate away. "I'm really not hungry at all." The quiet that settled over the table was almost painful. Henry's face shifted through several expressions quickly, eventually landing on a mix of anger and worry. "Since when do you start turning down food that doesn't cost anything?" he practically yelled. "What? Are you saying you're too good to eat leftovers now?" Chloe immediately stood up from her seat. "I need a breath of fresh air," she announced as she headed toward the restaurant's outside seating area. I didn't take very long before I went after her, leaving Henry with the children. What Chloe said to me outside completely shocked me. It turned out that Henry's almost fanatical focus on not wasting food wasn't really about saving money at all. He'd secretly been betting away their savings for years, keeping the actual depth of their money problems a secret. All of those times he had insisted on ordering extra food. He had been using the restaurant bills to hide the fact that he was taking money out of their accounts. His method for concealing his overspending from Chloe involved offloading his leftovers onto me. She explained that he'd been doing this for quite some time as she dabbed at her tears. Anytime I questioned a large restaurant bill, he'd claim Lucas consumed a portion of it, or we'd all shared with Lucas. It made me feel terrible to have been suspicious, since I'd been unknowingly supporting his narrative. I felt disgusted. All this time, I'd been an innocent participant in my brother's deceit. Chloe showed me some of their financial records on her phone. The amounts were shocking. Their savings had vanished and they were buried in debt. "I'm getting a divorce," she said softly. "I can't keep doing this. The girls require a stable home life. Also, Henry needs assistance he won't allow me to provide." I sat with her for a period of time, trying to absorb everything. When we went back to the table, Henry was absent and the children seemed utterly worn out. I drove them back to their house, replaying in my head every single meal, every single piece of food I'd eaten to help my brother sustain his fabrications. This morning, my phone vibrated with a text from Henry. I need a place to stay. Chloe's attorneys have been in contact. Don't tell our parents. I'm looking at that message at this very second, questioning how being the family's refuse receptacle resulted in this situation. Part of me simply wants to disregard it to finally cease cleaning up Henry's messes. But he's still my brother, and those girls are still my nieces. I haven't replied. I've been sitting here, my finger poised over the keys for 60 minutes now, and the humor of it isn't lost on me either. Years ago, Henry made me finish his food, and now he's the one needing me to fix his life. Should I actually let him stay here with me? The place has enough room, but I can't shake the feeling that this is simply the same old story. Another problem I'm supposed to solve because, as usual, I'm the helpful brother. My phone just buzzed another notification. It's Chloe wanting to discuss the kids. Looks like I have a few crucial choices to make. It's been 3 months since Henry showed up here, and things have taken an unexpected turn. I recall how I wrote about my brother's habit of unloading his leftovers on me. Well, it turns out karma has a way of making things come full circle. In fact, I allowed Henry to move in, but there were very specific rules. He contributes to the rent, though it's less than the going rate. He buys his own groceries, and most significantly, he has to get help with his gambling problem. He accepted everything, probably because he was out of options after Chloe got the house in their divorce. The first week was tense, but it wasn't a disaster. Henry kept to himself, mostly eating takeout in his room. But as his cash dwindled, I started to see a shift in how he behaved. He would hang around the kitchen when I was cooking, making remarks about how good everything smelled. Then came the subtle suggestions. "Mom always said sharing is caring," he'd say, looking at my dinner with interest. I thought, wow, that might be too much for a single serving. But I stuck to my guns. Everyone's meals are their own problem. Henry and I had established that understanding. Things started to change about a month back when my 16-year-old niece, Willow, began coming over more often. She'd come to my place after school, supposedly to study, although I sensed something else was going on. One night, while Henry was at his required therapy session, she confided in me. "Dad's been acting strange about food at Mom's place as well," she explained as she moved the pasta I had made for her around her plate. "He shows up at dinner time. He'd state that he was just passing by. Mom feels bad and asks him inside, however, it's very awkward." The next day, Chloe, my sister, called me. She admitted she'd lost weight. It was a result of all the stress. Her daughters, Willow and Mila, weren't eating properly either. They would watch Henry poke at what they left behind, making comments about waste and finances, and it killed their appetites. Then I had an idea. I began preparing extra helpings of food, not for Henry but for Chloe and the girls, wholesome and nutritious meals that they could easily heat up. Willow would take them home after her homework sessions, and sometimes I would deliver them myself. The change in them was incredible. Mila, my younger niece, started to smile again. Chloe appeared less stressed. Henry, of course, took notice. It's tough to miss the aroma of a recent meal or all the containers leaving my apartment. The initial instance he saw me packaging a still-hot lasagna, his expression was this. It's a complicated swirl of feelings, this whole thing. "Are you making dinner for them?" he asked, his tone sharp. "You never cook for me." "You're an adult, Henry. You can make your own meals," I replied. "But they're enjoying my brother's food, and I'm left with the scraps." The absurdity of what he said just sat there between us. I just stared at him until it really registered. He went into his room in a huff, but I heard him later that night, messing around in the kitchen, probably going through the stale takeout in the refrigerator. Things had reached a boiling point last week. I was preparing Willow's favorite chicken when Henry got home sooner than expected from his therapy. He took one look at the food and just snapped. "This is so unfair, Lucas. You're doing this to torment me," he said, pointing at the ingredients. "I'm your brother living right here, consuming cold leftovers while you cook fresh meals for my ex-wife, just like you made me eat your leftovers all those years." I kept my tone even. "The distinction is I'm not making anyone eat anything they don't want to. You made your own decisions to end up in this situation, Henry." He got quiet then, but I could sense him watching me as I cooked. The day after that, I discovered him trying to make scrambled eggs. They were burnt, but it was a start. This morning, Willow told me Henry's asked her to teach him a few simple recipes. She's thinking about it, though understandably she's hesitant. Chloe told me that he's been going to his therapy sessions more regularly, as well. I'm not sure if it's the reality check of consuming old. I'm not sure if it's because he's ordering less takeaway, or if the therapy sessions are finally making a difference. But something is definitely changing. I noticed him yesterday, searching for recipes on his phone. Last night's uneaten dinner is still sitting in the fridge. He could have eaten it, and I wouldn't have cared. But perhaps he's discovering that some lessons are best learned with freshly prepared food, instead of cold leftovers. Chloe just messaged me, asking if I can show Mila how to cook her favorite mac and cheese this weekend. Henry heard me agree to it, and for the first time in ages, he remained silent. Instead, he asked if he could watch. I haven't replied yet. Part of me wants to believe that he's truly changing. But I've dealt with enough of his problems to be wary. However, maybe the family dynamic will undergo a more significant transformation this time. I suppose we'll see what unfolds over the weekend. At least now, he understands what it's like to be on the other side of the equation. This is the last update. It all came to a peak last night, and I believe this chapter is coming to an end. I have to tell you, this isn't the revenge tale some of you wished for, but things still took their own course. Do you recall the cooking lesson with Mila that I mentioned? It turned into something entirely unexpected. Henry showed up like he said he would, but he brought our parents completely unexpectedly. He had apparently. I had spent weeks explaining how I was mentally tormenting him with food, turning his children against him and ruining the family. Mom was already in the middle of a long speech about family obligations when she entered the room. Then, she abruptly froze. Looking through the kitchen window, she noticed Willow and Mila in the backyard arranging a surprise party for Henry. You see, what my brother didn't realize was that, during the previous month, his daughters had been secretly learning to make his favorite childhood dishes. They wanted to demonstrate that food could be about affection, not domination. They asked me to show them the ropes, and Chloe had been encouraging, hoping it might mend some hurts. The girls had made everything. His beloved lasagna, which was our grandmother's recipe, along with the garlic bread he used to fight with me for, and even that awful 7-layer chocolate cake he always wanted for his birthdays. It was the same cake that he would eat half of and then force me to finish since it would be a waste otherwise. Henry just stood there, completely still. When she saw the backyard setup through the window, Mom's scolding trailed off. Dad, who'd been silently angry, moved closer to see what had silenced everyone. That's when Willow noticed us and raced inside. "Uh-oh," she said. "You're here too soon. We weren't completely finished." Her face went down when she saw the worried looks everyone was giving each other. We intended it to be a surprise. Mila came in right after her, still wearing the world's most dad apron they had bought as a silly present. I was filled with pride as I declared that we had made everything ourselves, but then I paused, studying the adults' expressions. Okay, Uncle Lucas showed us the way, but we did all the actual labor. The quiet felt incredibly heavy. Then my mom asked the question that would change everything. "Girls, who came up with this?" Willow said it was her idea. She recalled when we were children and how Dad used to boast about Grandma teaching him to cook. However, he never actually cooked for us. I remember thinking if we learned, we could cook together, like something we could share as a family. Henry sank onto my couch. I saw him look genuinely embarrassed for the first time ever. It wasn't just the embarrassment of getting caught. It was a deep internal shame. You learned to cook. For me, his voice was almost inaudible. Yep. Mila jumped in. "Uncle Lucas said you used to enjoy cooking with Grandma." Before, she didn't complete the thought. She didn't have to. We all knew. Before the gambling addiction. Before food was a way to conceal funds, before mealtimes became about financial transactions rather than relationships. Mom studied all the food laid out, then she looked at me, and then at Henry. She started to say how all those times I said Lucas was being harsh about food. He was instructing my girls in what I should have been teaching them. Henry cut her off. His voice broke. All that time I was trying to make him look bad in your eyes, while in reality he was actually being the dad I should have been. That's when I fell apart. 25 years of emotional distress associated with food spilled out. Henry spoke about how his gambling started, how food became his secret shield. He used me to conceal his. He revealed everything to my folks. The divorce, the therapy, the embarrassment, laying it all bare. Tears welled up in his eyes as he looked at his girls. "I don't merit this birthday meal," he said. "That's true," I said, finally finding my voice. "You don't, but they deserve a dad who can sit down and simply eat with them. No hidden agendas, no trying to control things, and definitely no making anyone feel like a prisoner. He owes them that kind of father. Now be that father, I thought. The dinner that followed was uncomfortable, raw, and surprisingly therapeutic. Henry ate everything his girls prepared. There wasn't any criticism about how much was on their plates or moving food around. He actually listened as they enthusiastically described how they learned to make each dish. He even asked for more lasagna, confessing it was superior to his own attempts to replicate Grandma's recipe. This morning, Henry gave me an envelope. Inside was a check to cover all the unpaid rent, plus a note. Taking ownership feels better than any leftovers, he wrote. Thank you for not giving up on the girls. Or me. He is moving out next week, having found a small apartment nearer to his therapy office. The girls are thrilled since the new place has a proper kitchen, and they have already scheduled weekly family cooking nights. Chloe is tentatively hopeful about co-parenting with this new version of Henry. As for me, well, I'm going to be leading a cooking class at the community center next month. Willow's suggestion. She thought maybe other kids have parents who need reminding that food is. Food is so much more than just sustenance, and she is probably correct in that assessment. I still possess the okayest dad apron. Keeping it in my kitchen is, for me, like a helpful nudge, letting me know that the sweetest form of retribution is not always the malicious kind. Instead, it is prepared with love, fresh from the oven, and presented with care. Mom phoned earlier to say sorry for not believing in me. She's dropping by tomorrow, claiming she wants to show me Grandma's real recipe for lasagna. It seems the one Henry had been using all this time was not completely accurate. Isn't it amazing how situations sometimes end up repeating themselves? I believe there are some leftovers that are actually worth retaining, just not the awful ones.